Yeah, there's probably a couple of ways to think about the AI and the ecosystem. One is the role of the startups, actually, and the tier 2 providers and the niche specialized vendors that are often overlooked, but they play a ever greater role, especially as AI is such a wide field of opportunities for new vendors to step in and partner with the likes of Accenture or Deloitte or PwC or KPMG or Capgemini, you name it, right? All these vendors we track on a daily basis. Now there's like a new vast ecosystem of startups that they are starting to cripple up, and actually the big vendors are starting to pay attention. How would someone like Accenture bringing startups into the conversation with the buyer, or in the conversation with NVIDIA, for example, with AWS? This is where it becomes very important to have an understanding of your common governance framework, how you manage your relationship with your partners. Buyers are often see those startups as part of a bigger discussion and as an end buyer. So usually someone like Accenture or SI will fold them into the relationship and tie their niche capabilities to a particular professional services line. But within the ecosystem itself, it's important to have the understanding like who plays role how. And the startups have that opportunity to provide niche specialization in technology areas that the large providers may be too expensive and too risky to invest in them, essentially. We've seen those vendors investing, pursuing minority investments, so that's one way for recognition and bringing into market. So one message here is don't ignore the startups because they are providing a great IP. The other piece to think about the role of AI within the ecosystem is how those technologies are also changing the dynamics of the commercial models between each parties from a service delivery perspective and the way they are thinking about outcome-based pricing versus traditional, consumption-based models that the hyperscalers may be accustomed to, or selling hardware servers, if you're talking about someone like Dell or HPE from that perspective. So this is where the nuance becomes relevant about the customer zero, like how much of those vendors use AI for their own operations, and then how they can actually bring to the clients. So that alignment between multiple customer zeros and going to market through a commercial and pricing models that actually reflect that experience in the use cases is where we're going to see some testing the limits of who's really willing to take on some more risk. And one groups of vendors can say, well, we've been doing so much more, you're still doing the old way, let us show you how, and be the kind of the lead in. That's going to be change the conversation from a partnership perspective, but the changing the business model and the go-to-market model, operating model of those companies will also change the conversation on how they partner with each other as well.
Well, I think there is no one big thing with AI in terms of how it impacts the cloud market. It's very nuanced, and so on the application side, there's revenue being generated with some of the early offerings in that space, and I think that will continue, although there's a reluctance, there's a skepticism among customers around, really, are they getting the value for what they're outlaying in terms of those investments? So overcoming that, I think, is key for 2025, actually continuing making that next investment, even continuing with some of the subscriptions that have been put in place to date. There's no guarantees there, and I think it's really beholden on the vendors to really prove that value in a way that customers can build that into a business case that makes sense for their organization. On the infrastructure side, you got to spend. Get those capabilities up and running, get the data centers, investments that will continue in terms of double-digit CapEx increases, and they feel like they have to make those investments now so that they can be making money in 5 years from GenAI.
When I think about generative AI in the services space, there are three big opportunities that the IT services companies and consultancies are going to take advantage of this coming year. The first one, in the very short term, it's all about change management. It's all about actually being able to adopt generative AI solutions within your organizations, particularly for companies that have a mess for data. That's one. The second is a very long term, and that's around governance, risk, and compliance. We've talked about that for a while. The big four firms are uniquely positioned to do that well. And then the third is sort of the long and ever expansive traditional technology adaptation, migration, adoption, modernization, all the words you want to throw around it. Generative AI is no different than any other technology in that way. It's going to require an army of consultants and a vast amount of IT services talent to be able to adopt it to an enterprise and make it meaningful. So those three opportunities, that last one being very sort of vague, but critically probably the largest revenue source for these companies, is going to be what drives generative AI in 2025.
The key takeaways, it's going to vary from defense and civilian, as you'd imagine would be the case. Civil is going to be focused more on leveraging AI to improve citizen-facing services. On the defense side, it's going to be leveraging AI to enhance the acquisition and the analysis of real-time data in combat environments, for example, or to improve operations, improve supply chains in defense, in the defense industrial base. Where we're positioning ourselves is, we're looking at the top of the market in terms of the federal systems integrators. What are they winning, and very importantly, who are they partnering with? Because they, much like they did in the cloud market, when cloud really started to take off after the pandemic 4 years ago, almost 5 years ago now, they realized we don't have the technologies, we don't have the cutting edge know-how, and that know-how resides in the commercial market. So they, across the board, started to look to their commercially focused IT peers. And we have seen an explosion of activities both to establish new partnerships with the leaders in multiple aspects of commercial IT, as well as in specific areas like AI. So partnerships are going to be key, and in many ways, it's already table stakes. If you're not, for example, in cloud, if you're not already partnering with AWS and Microsoft and the other hyperscalers, then you're behind the curve. Okay, we have seen that. We've been keeping very close track of that with our research. I believe the same thing is going to happen in AI and GenAI. We are seeing companies like Booz Allen Hamilton, for example, with their joint venture activity, going out and kicking the tires on small bleeding edge AI developers, GenAI from Silicon Valley, et cetera, to not only keep themselves on that cutting edge, abreast of and have access to groundbreaking GenAI technologies, but also to have perhaps the opportunity down the road to acquire some of these companies to expand their own capabilities.
Well, I think there's a lot of potential there for GenAI. It has a lot of opportunity to optimize agency operations and enhance employee efficiency. The thing is, it takes time to really implement and to really reap those benefits. You need to have robust, modern infrastructures in place to use that. But once they are in place, we're going to start to see some really interesting stuff. Like, I think one of the more interesting applications of GenAI is how it can refine code. So for federal fiscal year 2025, the budget, its growth is slowing for some federal civilian agencies, might even contract for a few. And we're also dealing with this nationwide shortage of software developers. And agencies have been adopting low-code, no-code platforms for some time. They're a cost-effective way for people without really any background in software development or coding to build applications, test them. And we're seeing vendors like ICF weaving more GenAI capabilities into these low-code, no-code platforms, which it really has the opportunity to make it even easier for people without any of this background to build these applications, test them out. And the broader part of that is now agencies, instead of having to vie for this limited talent pool, they have the opportunity to go out and say, like HHS, they can hire someone with more relevant domain expertise than, say, someone who's just been specializing in software development. They can focus on the nuts and bolts of what they want.
So it's here to stay, definitely. I think overall, what I'm saying that is we saw actually buyers are starting to develop a separate line of within their IT budgets for GenAI, which was completely different than a year ago when they were looking into vendors trying to present the savings and use the savings to reinvest into GenAI. But I think buyers' mindset is changing, and I think there's going to be a lot more focus on scale deployments in the specific use cases that were in a proof of concept a year ago. Now they're a little bit more proof of value, and software development and content development, certainly the low-hanging fruits, improving customer experience is the big thing. But we also see a much greater opportunity. You mentioned agentic AI as what's going to be the bigger impact for the services vendors. because we do see a great potential for a use case at the IT operation level when it comes to agentic AI, and take, for example, migration of mainframe workloads from mainframe to cloud or hybrid cloud environment. So agentic AI is essentially an opportunity that can fill in a skills gap. Take, for example, COBOL developers. There's those skills very few people have those skills anymore. So developing the agentic AI solutions using, to move from mainframe to cloud and private cloud can certainly present a greater use case beyond those front office applications, but more on the IT operations level.
So there's what everybody thinks it's going to be, and there's what it's probably going to be. So what everybody would like it to be is about AI coming into the network domain, network operations, maintenance, all of those things. It's probably not going to be the marquee topic for AI next year for telco. It's most likely going to be customer care evolution. And when I say that, I'm talking about AI chatbots that are leveraging generative AI, having human communications, just like you'd be talking to a regular person at a call center, and the transformation of those operations and what kind of outcomes the operators can get from that. So in terms of maybe cross-sell, upsell opportunities, getting faster response times, faster time to resolution, those types of things is where it gets really interesting. That is most likely what is going to be the big change from AI in the telco industry next year.
2025 infrastructure AI trends are really going to be focused on capturing the attention of enterprises. CSP demand was extremely high in 2024, but infrastructure vendors need to make a plan and execute on attracting the next wave of demand as enterprises start to really decide how they're going to use AI and invest in their own solutions. Now's the time to deploy those unique solutions, unique services around the infrastructure, and really make headway with the enterprise. Further, I think we'll see a much more expanded focus on ecosystems within the infrastructure vendors. So, of course, all major infrastructure vendors are focused on partnering with NVIDIA in the AI space, but we're going to see so much more partnering in many categories, including data models, systems integrators, cloud service providers, ISVs. These are all going to be huge partnership opportunities where infrastructure vendors may not have been as influential in the past, but AI in the unique demands of these workloads will really give them more opportunity to add value to the entire supply chain for AI.
We'll see AI, I think we'll see two kind of trends in the devices space. You can categorize it into trends you'll see in hardware and then trends you'll see in software. And a lot of that hardware innovation is being driven by the silicon vendors. So your AMD, Intel, Qualcomm, all these guys have developed these AI PC chips that leverage what they're calling a neural processing unit, which is a dedicated piece of silicon to accelerate AI workloads. I think that's where we're going to see hardware innovation. We're going to see these chips become more and more powerful. But really, again, going back to the AI applications and the killer apps for AI PCs, that's what's going to drive AI PC adoption. And thus far, we haven't really seen that killer app come to market that says, you really need to buy this AI PC, otherwise you're not going to be able to do XYZ workload. That kind of innovation, I think, is going to be driven more by the platform providers. So somebody like Microsoft with their Windows OS, as well as the silicon vendors with any developing tools that they're going to give to their application developers on their platforms. So I really see software innovation being driven more by the platform providers, the silicon providers, as well as other independent software vendors, and maybe even some tools and resources provided by the PC OEMs. Whereas I see a lot of that hardware innovation being driven almost exclusively by the silicon vendors.